Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss 1993's The Vanishing. Directed by George Sluizer and starring Jeff Bridges, Kiefer Sutherland, Nancy Travis, and Sandra Bullock. Jeff and Diane are a regular couple on a road trip. After a brief argument regarding running out of gas, they soon make up in a gas station parking lot. Diane, however, seemingly vanishes after entering the store, and Jeff is left alone. His whole world is turned upside down searching for what happened to Diane. He eventually meets Rita and tries to start a new life, but his obsession finding Diane causes tension. Meanwhile, Barney Cousins is a man demonstrating disturbing behavior with a bottle of chloroform, an isolated cabin, and a suspicious family. The two worlds will soon collide, and Jeff will be forced to make a choice to move on with his life or finally discover what happened to Diane. The Vanishing is for horror fans that enjoy a thriller mystery and seeing how that mystery is crafted. Also joining me tonight is my amazing co-host, Zena Dixon. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us tonight. Zena, how are you doing tonight?
Justin, I'm doing so well. I'm so excited to talk about this one.
Me too. So excited. I can't even tell you the first time I saw this movie. It's been such a part of my life. Now, I will say it was after I knew who Sandra Bullock was. I was already familiar with her work in While You Were Sleeping, Speed, those kind of girl next door, all of the America's Sweetheart roles.
Right.
So when I first saw this, I don't, we won't get any spoilers, but I definitely was like, oh. So I was surprised by how things went. But again, as always, we'll start off with our no spoiler review, but we're talking about 1993's The Vanishing. Just it was such a captivating movie for me. And even though we're doing a no spoiler review first, that's part of the fun, I think, in this movie is that
Yeah.
it almost is a big spoiler right from the beginning.
Hmm.
There's definitely suspense about the choices that people make and what would you do in this situation. And the whole not knowing, I think that that's usually the scariest thing I think of, even watching horror movies, the anticipation of seeing gore and blood, but I think it's the not knowing what's going to come. That's what I think, at least for me, really
Yeah.
scares me when I watch horror movies. That's what I love about it.
Hmm.
In this movie, that's the central question, the not knowing, and how do you handle that? How does that affect your life? And I just think that that's a really great concept. Now, this is a remake of a French Dutch movie. And
Hmm.
at the time, contemporary criticisms of this one, people didn't really respond well to it because they liked the original so much. And I won't get into too many spoilers on the original, but I will say that it ends a little bit more on a bleak note. And I think that
Mm.
people, because of this movie having a slightly altered ending to have things kind of settle in a different way, I think people were like, they wanted to go for that more bleak ending. Personally, I really love the ending of this movie and I love what they did with it. But we'll get to the ending. We get to the ending. The things I love about it, just the performances. Again, like I said, Sandra Bullock, to have her, this is one of her
Yeah.
first roles. I think she's so memorable in it, even though she's
Hmm.
really in it for just a short period of time. I love Jeff Bridges, the quirkiness. I think I was always used to him as quirky, slackery type actor or the hero, but to see him as this sort of off kilter villain really works. On the flip side, I think Kiefer Sutherland does a wonderful job at playing this sort of self destructive hero where we're
Yeah.
used to see him. I mean, we did our episode on Freeway, it just shows what a full circle he can be in terms of being the villain, whether it's from Freeway, The Lost Boys, or sort of the hero protagonist in a movie like The Vanishing. And I think he walks that line really well. And I also really love Nancy Travis's performances. The four leads, I think, are just solid. I had always
Yeah.
known her from Three Men and a Baby. So,
Hmm.
and Three Men and a Little Lady, where she's very straight laced kind of in it. So to see her really sink her teeth into it. I loved it.
Yeah.
But again, just overall the suspense, the way, it's a twist and turn kind of movie, but at the same time, we're let in on the secrets. Right away, okay, what is this guy doing? What is Jeff Bridges doing? And then when you
Hmm.
see this couple, somehow their paths are all meant to cross. It's just waiting to see how it's gonna fall through. But
Yeah.
anyway, those are my initial thoughts. I just love it. I highly recommend The Vanishing. This was your first time watching it, correct? Yeah, I'm
Yes.
so stunned by that because, like I said, this is
Oh,
such a Xena, I think, in the lane of Xena type of movie. So I am
right.
desperate to hear your thoughts. So what did you think, Xena?
Okay, first, I loved this movie. I love the opening. I love like you know what's gonna happen, but I'm still at the edge of my seat, holding out hope and getting annoyed. And it's just like, why would you do that? Type of thing. And then the ending, I love the ending. I haven't seen the original, but I love, maybe I'm biased by this, but I love the ending. I think that it was very fitting. It felt smart, you know, and even with the characters, first kind of what you said with Jeff Bridges, you're right. I'm used to always seeing him as like the quirky kind of guy, the like the nice guy and all that other stuff. So seeing him in this type of role, he did an incredible job. He has such a presence. And then Kiefer Sutherland, he's always just so awesome. So but we talked about Freeway. So we already know that he's like a chameleon, with it, but you can't help
Absolutely.
but feel for him. And then of course, with Sandra Bullock, like, oh man, she just seems so sweet, where it's just like you felt I feel horrible for her, and it's so unfortunate because and that's what truly makes this movie terrifying and very creepy. It's just the kind of like it makes you feel like you can't even be nice anymore. You can't even just and sometimes it's not even about that, it's just unfortunate. Nancy Travis as Rita, I have a love-hate relationship with her. I'm not gonna lie, but she
Yeah.
she came through. But I'm used to seeing her from So I Married an Ex-Murderer. That's
Ah,
where I
for
remember
sure.
her
You're right.
from.
Yes, I
So
did forget about that one. Yes.
like she's always been like such a mystery to me, but it's just kind of like truly and honestly, she just loved Jeff so much, and I get it, but it's just like the stuff that she went through. But yeah, this movie is a must watch. I feel like if you're someone who loves thrillers, you love mystery, it has it all. Like, oh my god, it will pull at your heartstrings. And like I was actually when I rewatched it again today, my husband, like, he's working, and so I kind of found him, peeking over and asking me questions. And it's just like, this is why you just need to well, don't stop working, but this is why, you need to watch this movie fully. So yeah, I had a really great time watching it.
But yeah, then we'll jump in our spoiler reviews from here on out, everybody. Go watch this movie, come back and see if you agree with us. Yeah, I mean, it really is, like you said. Well, what you kind of touched on too with Barney, the character of Jeff Bridges. What's great about him too as a villain is because he can capitalize on his sort of friendly demeanor. We see him as this family guy. We see him with his daughter and the relationship that they have to
Mhm.
understand that like such a guy, this guy can be evil. And if you look back on like serial killers that have been caught, a lot of them were like that. And I
Yeah.
think that's truly part of the terror of this movie is that this can happen in broad daylight. Like you
Mhm.
said, it makes you not want to trust anybody. And even more so at a convenience store. It does go to show the simplicity of Barney's plan, which is brilliant.
Mhm.
You can just grab somebody in broad daylight,
Yeah.
with misguiding Sandra Bullock's character. I have to say, with Sandra Bullock character, what I was alluding to earlier, I feel like it's the equivalent for me of what audiences in 1960 would have been seeing Janet Leigh in Psycho in terms of I couldn't believe that Sandra Bullock's character like wasn't the main character as well as what
Same.
happened to her. Like, and
Mhm.
it's so terrifying. Like I'm a bit claustrophobic. So like Barney said, that's not the scariest thing he can think of is death. It's claustrophobic and being buried alive. And anyway, so I'm kind of now jumping all over the place, but I did want to say, yeah, it's the suspense of what can happen in daylight to somebody
Mhm.
as sweet and wonderful. And I like that the movie, one thing I really like about it too, is the examination of it feels like real couples. I
Yeah.
feel like Jeff and Diane, as well as Jeff and Rita, both were real couples. I mean, I really felt for Sandra Bullock's character when he left her in the tunnel. But I've also been on Jeff's position where you're
Yeah,
sort of like stressed and you're just like, even though you love this person, but you're just so stressed in the moment. You're like, can you just come on or stay? Do what you're gonna do. We've all
right.
been to that breaking point. And like, again, not that he did anything crazy, but you feel terrible for her because she's obviously scared of being in this tunnel for justifiable reasons. I'd be terrified too of
Same.
this thing. But on the flip side, the fact that they can make up, but it does give you, in terms of the film, a little bit of a hint that maybe she did just leave him. Maybe she did this whole thing like, I swear everything, we're gonna be together forever, and then leave him. I mean, you never, the movie's set up to think that. Also with Rita, I love that she gets mad at him, that she fights back when she comes in and she's wearing the wig and she's like, "You want
Uh,
me to be Diane?" It's horrible, but I get it. I get that frustration. And then again, back to Jeff, I totally relate to the idea. I know what it's like to not to have that obsessive not knowing feeling. I'm not going to share any big stories, but on a much smaller scale, I remember being 17 years old and I got my second speeding ticket. And at that time, a new law had come out in Ohio that under the age of 18, if you got two speeding tickets, you would lose your license for 6 months automatically. But because I was right on the cusp of it, I talked to this lawyer guy and we were going to possibly fight it because of like my age and how it all worked that I might be able to get by it. But I was so just the not knowing. And again, this is just such a smaller scale issue. But I
right.
remember even at the time, it's lasted my whole life. I remember the fear of not knowing what was going to happen was way worse than when I ended up losing my license for 6 months, and I lived with it. But until then, I mean, my life was like spiraling like, is this going to happen? How am I going to work? How am I going to do this? And again, that was 20 some years ago now. But at the time, the not knowing is just the worst. But what are your more spoilery thoughts about it? What did you think about the
Uh,
couples?
well, okay. First, let's start off with Diane and Jeff. I totally agree with you 100%. If I were Rita, I would not, I'm sorry, if I was Diane, I would not want to be in that tunnel, but I understand where Jeff is coming from, where it's like you said, either or, are you going to come with me or are you going to stay type of thing. I I don't know. I guess because we talked about it, but even with the vibe, it's just like she seems so in love with him.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to go anywhere, and the fact that up until like, before all things turned sour, she was trying to do something for him, and that's what's really heartbreaking with that. And my thing is too, I'm so surprised with the character Barney that he didn't pick someone who was by themselves, because it seemed like that. But so to me, that kind of just showcase, okay, you are a monster, in my opinion. Since you saw him, you see the guy that's waiting for it. Like, what do you think is going to happen? And the fact that too, like in that gas station, what irritated me the most is there were no cameras. That's what I was thinking the whole time. Like, can't you check the cameras? Like, that's fine. You have to wait 24 hours type of thing. And I mean, I guess I'm like overly thinking, but if I were Jeff, like when the police was asking questions, did you guys answer? No, we didn't. You know, there's no reason for that. And he knows her best. It's understandable. I think it was, of course, he was still in love with her, but that not knowing part clearly was eating away at him, and you could see it. And it's just kind of like he was unable to move on. So then when it comes to Rita and Jeff, I love them together. I think that it's a nice little balance. But the only reason they met was because of what happened with Diane. And so, not saying that it's only Rita's doing, but it's just kind of like, that he has a lot of issues. This is more than being a rebound. You know what I mean? You may never live up to this. And without giving too much information, I have a friend who was dating a guy who, unfortunately, his wife died years ago and he wasn't quite able to get over it. And it just was just showcasing where it was kind of like, and I know that sounds so insensitive, like, oh, you can't get over that. But it's just like, I want to say it's been over 5 years. And he's willing to date and move on in that way. But he couldn't quite, like, to him, that was the love of his life. Oh, that's the love of his life. There's no room for my friend. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So to me, it didn't seem that way with Jeff. It seemed like she got him not that she was like, trying to get him, but they got together at a really good time. where they kind of seemed like they kind of helped each other in some ways. And even though he was saying that if he found out that, Diane was still alive, he was saying that he wouldn't be with her. I don't know. I kind of got the vibe that in the beginning he would have. But finally, towards the end, and especially this jumping ahead, when he saw that other grave, like it looked like a grave, it seemed like he finally accepted she's not coming back. She's dead. This is what happened. So hopefully, I mean, clearly he was able to move on, but it took all of that, and the fact that, Rita is a strong woman, because a lot of people wouldn't hang around. So yeah, even when I'm not gonna lie, when she dressed up as Diane, I was like, oh, it kind of made me cringe, but I get it, and then even with that, it was just kind of like, I think that she always felt that there was something, because she wanted to check his computer. It's like you were kind of looking for something. And so at that point, maybe you shouldn't be with him that way. I mean, I'm happy that they stay together. I really am. But it just kind of seems that way. And then again, just going back with Jeff, Barney did say, it doesn't really seem like you're just the guy who's looking for, Diane. Yeah, what was his personality? I didn't really know him, like, during those 3 years, like, or after those 3 years. So it's just kind of like, who are you? And seeing how things work, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, obviously he needed this to happen, but it's just, you could see that it was like eating away at him, and he was trying to move away. But yeah, again, I love the fact that this kind of kept me on my toes. And this is kind of jumping ahead as well. I love the fact that his family seems to have, Barney's family has no idea. His wife, his daughter, they have no idea who that really is. And kind of like what you said earlier, with a lot of serial killers, it's just kind of like that's normally the case.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think, obsession from Jeff's point of view, I mean, if it can rule your entire life, it can take over everything. I think, Jeff could want to move on. Like people can have these dichotomous emotions or contradictory things where I think it's like he's obsessed, it's become his whole life, but now Rita's here and he wants to choose Rita, but the obsession keeps pulling him back. And I think that he in earnest wants to move on, but he can't. I do believe when he says at the gas station, if right now, if Diane was here, he says to Rita, if Diane was here, I would ask you to marry me. But the truth is, if I could go back in time and find out what would happen, that trumps all. And it's his most honest feelings. And I think Rita, I would be fed up at a certain point too, but at the same time, she knew who he was from the beginning. You knew that something was off. And when you find out, people could be having a bad day, but when you find out they come with this huge thing of baggage, it's not so easy to just let it go. But also when you're living your life, it is frustrating. And like she said, she's a fighter. And I think she saw what she was saying with like her family when she finally confronted him in the hotel room, was with her family, she's seen them be like Jeff, and she's not going to be that person. So he needs to like shape up or she's gone. But again, at the same time, she knew going in who he was. I do want to comment on something you said, which was, why did Barney pick somebody who was, with somebody else? Why not just pick somebody alone? And obviously he had a couple attempts where he was trying to, well, you get to see right from the beginning when he's like doing all his practicing. I mean, he starts at the cabin and he starts, he even knocks himself out. It's a different kind of obsession. Jeff has this obsession with his loss. Barney has this obsession with doing this evil act. And you see him even knocking himself out so that he can time how long the chloroform will work. Approaching these women, and he does approach these on their own women. But another main criticism besides the ending of the remake versus the original is how much of the idea of good and evil is explored. Now, I feel like this version, the 1993, definitely explores that version, and I think it takes it a step further. So why did Barney choose somebody who wasn't alone? I think that what happened is, according to Barney, he saved that girl's life. So he felt justified to then do something truly evil in order to be a god to his daughter, which is already, megalomaniacal. But I think what happens is say even if you take that element out, fine, you did something really good, so maybe you get to do something really bad. Let's just say that. The problem is that what I think happened is once you let it, the idea or what the film is trying to say is once you let evil into your life, you can't just have good into evil. Evil can be very seductive. Evil can be very all encompassing. And I think he was seduced by evil because if you look, he didn't just take, he didn't just save a life and then take a life. He knew that she was with him. He Barney's fed on Jeff's obsession and Jeff's
Yeah.
despair. And then he did it again. And when we get to the ending down the road, he was going to do it again. So
Yes.
evil, I think this movie does examine, which was again the criticism of the remake was the original was so centered on that idea of good and evil
Mm-hmm.
and then just the mystery. This movie, I think, does that same thing, but takes it a step further and it's like, no, once you go down the path of evil, there's no coming back. Like it's gonna seduce you, or it's really hard to help. But I did want to comment on that because I'm glad you asked that. I think that's an interesting question, and I think that it made it the thrill even more for him. And like he's like I said, it's so the obsession. Jeff's obsession became Barney's obsession, but I also really like that. Now, this movie handles some really dark angles, but I also like that there's a little bit of comedy to the
Yeah.
movie. I loved one of my favorite moments, like in cinematic history, and my aunt and I will still kind of quote each other, is the whole magically delicious line where she's talking to the upstairs neighbor, and she's like, the neighbor is very clear, and she's like, he was whooping on that man, he went after him, and then the strangest thing happened, the little leprechaun from the Lucky Charms box. And you're like, oh, what?
Oh
That's my
no.
kind of humor, the sort of like where you're caught off guard, like, wait, what did you just say? And she's like, magically delicious, which is the
Yeah.
theme song thing. I love that, but also just other moments too, like with Park Overall, who's Rita's friend, the whole they
Oh
call
yeah.
and leave the message, which I think is hilarious. But also the fact where the cop is like, "Have you had any to drink?" And she's like, "Just one." After another, so I feel like this movie does a nice job too at balancing the more harrowing moments with some lighter moments to kind of like take the audience out so that you can then be scared again.
This part, I don't obviously this line was not supposed to be funny, but I did laugh and then I felt bad afterwards. It was pretty much when Jeff, he was just, he went out to this like cafe to meet Barney, and Rita shows up and he's just like, go run like a coward. At least Diane was taken by force. And it's just like, oh my God, don't say that.
Yeah.
That was like such a burn. But yeah, I just felt like that was a little bit much, but I still like the line. And then again, just going back to Jeff Bridges' character, he honestly kind of felt like the Joker, like in some ways it's like he was, I'm not justifying what he did at all, but he seemed to have like a very logical mindset, but he pulled from his past and saying this is this whole explanation going over why he felt that he needed to do what he needed to do. And kind of like what you said, that he did it again, you know? Like I'm not justifying what he was doing and what he did, but it was just like in his mind it seemed like very much like a reason, and that's kind of how the Joker is. He has his reasons, and so kind of just kind of gave me that vibe. And then even with that, it's like I know even beforehand, like after I finished the movie, I wanted to know what other people were saying about it. So I did check out some reviews. And like you said, a lot of people who've seen the original, they're not fans of the ending. I love the ending. I thought it was
Loved
so
it. Yeah.
satisfying. And I love the fact that it wasn't a super happy Hollywood ending, you know. Spoiler, Diane was not found somewhere in a cellar,
Right.
eating crackers and surviving off of that. No, he's unfortunately, they never see each other again. And it sucks. And to me, that's not a happy ending. At least, yes, he has closure and he moved on with Rita. But with that, that's still such a traumatizing experience, even down to the point where they both don't even want to drink coffee.
Yeah. Seriously. Seriously.
Yeah.
And I like that little joke at the end, to kind of like it's a joke to make them laugh, but it's a nervous laughter of like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And one more thing I was going to say, I found his Barney's daughter Denise very interesting, and honestly, I
too.
kind of think that she may be like her dad. Maybe that's a little bit far fetched, but it's just like she just kept on talking about the infinity and that she's in love and has to be a speaker, and it's just like, girl, you are 13, like, sneaking out in the nights already. Like, I honestly concede. I think she's going to be like the female version of her dad, or who knows, like Joe from You. It could
Sure.
be a thing.
I never thought about that before, but you're right. Now, I also always found her character very interesting, but you're right. You're right.
Hmm.
I sorry, I've never really given it like I've never thought about her going that way. I was gonna say she's such like an out there character, like sort of spacey and flighty, but
Yeah.
in a way that's like too much, not just a typical teenager. Like she
Hmm.
wants her dad to kind of have an affair. She wants to know the mistress. She wants to be sneaky. I mean, she's romanticized it, but in the same way that her father has, romanticized this idea of like, he's like, oh, when he's telling the story about how he jumped off the roof, he's like, I did that. Everybody's had that thought. I did that. It's so grand,
Yeah.
but he is also calculating and logical. The daughter is very much wanting to, oh, I'm having these thoughts. Let me express them by going out and doing them. And it's only a
Hmm.
matter of time before you get to where you're saying the like female, oh, well, maybe I'm having now some homicidal thoughts. Let me go ahead
Yeah.
and express those. Interesting point. And on that note, if you're right, I'd like to go ahead and talk about the performances in general. I
Oh
think
yeah.
I wasn't going to start with that girl, but again, I think she does an excellent job. And they do something in this movie that I think is very hard to do, which is they age her from 10 to 13. That is a very hard thing to do. I've just
Mm-hmm.
out of the movie, just in terms of behind the scenes stuff, it's the same actress, but
Yeah.
she really does seem like a bit older. And then when
Hmm.
she's younger, she seemed like the actress herself. I don't know her name, but she did a really great job with that. And I just think that's really interesting. What you said, I think, is very thought provoking
Yeah.
because you're right. Who knows what she's going to grow up to be? But I would like to say, starting with Barney, with Jeff Bridges, with his relationship with his daughter, when he does the whole trick with the spiders, it's a weird prank thing that you would do to your child, but I'm sure
Yeah.
parents do things like that to get a scare or jump out or whatever. But like he's doing it, it's sort of horrifying that he's doing it to his daughter. And then when you know the reason why he's doing it is to find out from his neighbor if the neighbor could hear the screams, so that when he does his ultimate plan, he wants to make sure he's thought of everything. And
That
that's
is so
really effed
creepy.
up, that he and because that we start with Barney's point of view, and we start with where he is at the cabin. He's approaching these women, and so you've seen the motions that he's doing. So when the daughter first gets in the car, and you see him kind of grab her, you're like, oh, is he going to do something to his daughter? Because he's up to something. And then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, no, it's the got your nose safe. Then he does this thing with the spiders, and you're like, what is he going to do? And
Yeah.
but he is such an interesting
Hmm.
character. Jeff Bridges is the perfect kind of person to play this role
Yeah.
because you can think of him as lovable and you can
Hmm.
see him as this villain, this unrelenting villain who is condescending. He does
Hmm.
like know he has the upper hand, and it's that more delicious when everything plays out and some of the other characters maybe get a one up on him. But again, also with Sandra Bullock, you could see, again, it's always easy to say in hindsight, this person was going to be famous, but obviously, it's bodes well for her at the time that she can have such a smaller role, but you think she's the lead. And I feel like coming away, even people who saw it at the time would have thought of her as a leading role. She
Yeah.
has that much of a presence,
Hmm.
that much of a she is vulnerable in it, and she's lovable, and she has that, charismatic quality, but she's also just has this strong presence, and it is all the more devastating when you see the grave at the end, or how
Yeah.
everything plays out. And I believe her. I believe her from the moment she's on the screen to the moment she ends. Now we talked a little bit about Jeff and Rita, but again, Kiefer Sutherland. It's nice. It's refreshing to see him in a more hero. Now I
Hmm.
know that later on he did 24 and roles that
Yeah.
he's obviously been the protagonist, but this at that time was less Saw. It was more Stand by Me. He's the villain. Lost Boys. He's the villain. Freeway. He's the villain. So it was nice to see him in this. And I think he does, there is a quality about him. I believe him when he's put together at the beginning of the film, kind of in this nice sweater, khakis. I also believe him as the guy wearing the flannel, kind of falling apart, hair dirty, desperate. You believe both ends of it. And yeah, I forgot Nancy Travis is in So I Married an Axe Murderer. And I forgot I do love her in that movie. I love that movie.
So
I totally forgot about it. I love that movie. But in this role, she gets a real chance to play, somebody real. Like this, she's a real person. I could believe that she's this waitress, but I also love, because I waited tables for many, 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 many years. I love that she's kind of the smartest one of all of them in the end. She's kind of street smart, but she uses logic, and she even says to uh Jeff at one point, I know I'm not as smart as you. Bull. She is every bit as
yeah,
smart as
she
him.
really is.
And again, yeah, because he's a writer. He has that literary standpoint. So it is easy for somebody who waits tables to think they are
Mhm.
less than. They're not. And I
Not
love
at
that
all.
that really gets played. And whether people love the original or remake, I got to say her character is fantastic in this. All the characters are, and the performances make it worthwhile, in my opinion.
So I agree with you. I thought that all the performances were completely well done. I'll first start off with Sandra Bullock. Like what you said, she has that star quality. It's automatically you knew that she was going to be a star. You can visually see it. She had like a light about her, and it's unfortunate. And then with Jeff Bridges again, I was completely blown away by his performance, and it kind of just like, oh man, like it's so crazy that he could be dark, you know he could be so dark. And then with Kiefer Sutherland, I've always knew that he was a great actor, and because again, like I felt for him, like what are you supposed to do?
Right.
Say something like that. What do you do? So it's heartbreaking. And Nancy Travis, she's amazing. Like I said beforehand, I just remember her from. I know she was in a lot of things, but just because I really love So I Married an Axe Murderer. She's very mysterious and she was lovable in that one. But we kind of thought that she was an axe murderer.
Right, right.
In the beginning of it. And then even just going back to Denise, who played, well, the little girl, her name is Maggie Linderman. I had on my notes going like that. But yeah, the little girl who plays Denise, she did a great job. And like you said, you're absolutely right. Where it's like she went from being like a little kid to making like that little preteen transition. That was very well done. And I even like the performance of Jeff's wife, Helene. She just seemed like a very reserved woman. And it seems like they would be together, but it's just kind of like, I mean, unless she really knew. Obviously, she didn't really know who she married, unfortunately. But the point is, I feel like everybody did a really good job. Like the performances on this movie is on point. And even while I was reading the reviews, I don't really recall anyone saying anything negative about the reviews.
People get so influenced by an earlier work, and at the time, if you look, like we've talked a lot about early 90s movies,
Mm-hmm.
and Siskel, Ebert, all of them at the time just had a stickler, or couldn't let go of certain things. Couldn't, I think we're becoming jaded. I think that happens. I watch a lot of like reaction videos and stuff on YouTube, even some that are like people who don't watch horror are reacting to horror, but I've noticed like
Mm-hmm.
about 8 or 9 episodes in, they start to become a little jaded, like, oh, don't go in there. What are you doing? And it's like a
Right.
trap they fall into. Like you have to remember, you have to watch each movie. Like you have to remember, people don't know they're in a movie. They don't know, they don't know it's a horror movie, or there's certain things set up intentionally. Like they have to make some. I make dumb mistakes. It's like these people all think if they were in a horror movie, they would survive, they would do everything. Bull. The moment you see something scary, you don't know how you're going to react in that moment until you're there. Just that made me just
Right.
think of that with the criticisms. And I think of a lot of it are like that thing. I've never seen the
Well,
original, but I've never read the book that it was based on either. But I guess in the book, do you care if I spoil the book a little bit?
no, not at
So,
all.
so in the book, the character of Rita, I don't know if she even exists in the book. I think her character is in the original, but so with her not existing, there's nobody to really save Jeff. So he
Mhm.
obviously, as we get into the ending now, in the original story, that's where it ends. He's in the box. He's made his choice. He's there. And it's sort of in the book, this sort of romantic idea. The character of Diane, or her counterpart, if you will,
Mhm.
always was having this reoccurring nightmare that she was in this golden egg. In fact, I think that's what the original book was called, the golden egg or something. She had this dream that she was in this golden orb or egg floating in space endlessly and just waiting for her for to meet this other golden orb or golden egg.
Mhm.
So then cut, she ends up vanishing, et cetera, et cetera. So the book ends with him in that, in this enclosed thing, sort of like a golden egg. So the idea is almost like they're reunited in death, which was what her
Mhm.
dream was always about, like that she was going to be floating endlessly. And that's over 3 years, until he meets her again. And he does because he goes through with her. But I think that's a really interesting concept. But I also like that this movie it does give you that ending. You get both endings from the original and the remake. And I don't know why people wouldn't love that. You get the fact he made the choice. He suffered and he almost died. There's just
Mhm.
also a little bit more that could happen where you do get a happy ending too, where Rita does kind of come in and save the day. But it's just as you experience the horrifying moment of like, he's stuck now. How is he going to get out of this? And at times you think, not only is he going to be stuck in this, Rita's going to get stuck in this same situation.
Yeah.
So you still get that catharsis, that sort of cathartic moment. You get that bleakness, but then you
Yeah.
also get a little bit more. And I like that it almost ends up into this sort of traditional slashery type ending. I'm always about that in every movie. It makes me think of movies like Deceived, where they criticized the whole chase. Like that was the big thing, criticisms at the time. Was the big chase sequence at the end. I love a good chase sequence as
Mhm.
long as it's done intelligently and there's a purpose for it. And I think there is, such as, Rita had to use all of these clues to find Jeff. I love that like everything is very well crafted in this movie. Like everything is there for a reason, and I love that. And she puts these clues together. So the whole chase week happens in the woods. I love that like she literally lands right on his grave, not knowing it. Like that's
Yeah.
chilling to me. And then
Mhm.
keeps running and then puts it together. But I also love again, there's still the comedic moment of Barney walking through the woods. He's like, there's no point in running. I know these woods like the back of my hand. And then he slips on some roots and stuff. Like I love that. Like it's so
Yeah.
great. In fact, I showed my mom this for the first time and I had to rewind it like 5 times. She couldn't stop laughing. She loved that moment so much. And I think it all comes together in a way that I like that the tables are turned on this condescending person who thinks he
Mhm.
knows it all and has it all. But the point is, everybody has a vulnerable spot. And for him, it's his daughter, Denise. And Rita
Yes.
exploits that with this whole infinity thing, which was I was also going to allude to the whole golden egg thing. I don't know if the infinity symbol was a part of that. But again, that's all symbolic of like, Diane forever, the lighter.
Mhm.
There's these themes that I think all come together in a way that makes this movie truly successful. And I haven't seen the original, but I think this is a flawless movie in my opinion.
And I feel like the ending to me was very satisfying. And this is what made me really love Rita. That the fact that she was just joking around with her friend, they were a little bit tipsy. She calls home and then she hears this and immediately she takes action, even though she's tipsy, and so it's just kind of like, then when she sleeps it off, she wakes up and immediately she's gonna go try to like solve this situation. She ultimately saves Jeff. You mentioned this before with Rita and her being street smart and everything, with her, again being kind of like with her being like a waitress and she didn't feel like she was as smart. And it's just kind of like she's truly one of she's, if not the smartest character in this movie.
Agreed.
Because like you said, I love the fact when she puts the pieces together. She sees his, there's some grass roots that's on his shoes, and then she kind of goes back to seeing outside what she remembers seeing, and then she sees the shovel and she puts it together, and it's just like that, like the adrenaline was rushing, through her clearly, and she knew she had to do something. I love the fact that she did find Barney's weakness, Denise, and then she immediately took action, and it sounded believable because he called home, she's not there. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, uh-oh. But if anything, like I'm so surprised that she didn't tie him up. But again, that adrenaline, and she most likely, if she knew that, clearly she knew that Jeff was buried, you have to take immediate action.
Yeah.
With that, you can't wait. I loved it. And then at the end, again, I love the fact that, it's not a picture perfect ending. It's not that Hollywood happy ending. This guy's gonna be traumatized. Not only is he gonna be traumatized, his well, his new boo thing. Well, not they've been together for a while, but yeah, she's gonna be traumatized, and
Yeah.
but they have each other. But then not only just with that, but Barney's wife is gonna be traumatized, and there's already something going on with the daughter. So it's just like a chain reaction.
I think ultimately it's a heartbreaking story. You used
Yeah.
the word heartbreaking earlier about Diane's character, and I think it is. I think that
Mhm.
I feel that like I wasn't expecting that when I was probably, I think the first time I saw this, maybe 12, 13.
Wow.
And I'm like, enough that I knew who Sandra Bullock was, that I was like, wait, she doesn't make it? Like,
Yeah.
it's like I couldn't register that. That was so even though I'd seen 1,000 horror movies and stuff, the
Mhm.
main person always survived, and I just thought she was a character that was like supposed to survive. So it is heartbreaking when you see that grave and you're like, you feel that emptiness, which
Yeah.
again is just as effective as I have to imagine the original is. It's one of those stories that is brilliant. I think it's a brilliant story, and it's effective on a lot of levels, and I'm surprised, like I was surprised you hadn't seen this, but I can only imagine how many other people have not
Mhm.
seen this. And I think it's one of those movies everybody should at least give it one good look. Like, it's a ride, and it's
I
interesting.
agree.
Yeah, because right from the beginning too, it brings you in because everything's being spoiled. You
Mhm.
know how he does it all. You just need to know how it was done. Like, how
Right.
did it work? You know all the puzzle pieces right from the beginning. You just need to you watch the movie as the puzzle kind of gets put together. I think that's a really cool idea.
I agree. And I'll even be as bold enough to say I feel like this is one of the best films from one of, I'm not saying the best, just in case someone's like, what? No, one of the best, thriller movies from the 90s. I
Cool.
feel like
Yeah.
the acting is top notch. And then on top of that, they have like an all-star cast. The storyline is awesome. It's like kind of like what you just said. You kind of know, you just want to know the details of it.
I think that it's a great choice for people that want something fresh, because it does give you everything right from the
Mhm.
beginning, and you're going to have strong performances, you're going to be satisfied, and it's going to give you both a feeling of having like that empty bleakness, but at the same time a little bit of an optimism at the end. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Have you seen The Vanishing? Are you a fan of the original, the remake, the book? What do you like? What do you comment below? Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us. As always, you can find Zena over at Wicked Horror, realqueenofhorror.com, or on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker. And I'm Justin. You can also find me over at Wicked Horror, Horror One Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thank you, Zena, for watching The Vanishing. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. I knew you
Oh,
would.
thank you. Thank you so much. Again, definitely one of my favorites, and I feel like I need to own the movie now.
For sure. Well, thanks again, everybody, for watching. We'll see you soon. Have a good one.